Hey there, Dango Stu here. Today's video is about continuing to reassemble the Detroit diesel after its rebuild, and is proudly sponsored by marineengine.com. So this week the reassembly of the Detroit's been progressing pretty well. So far no major disasters, which is nice. So we'll start by heading back in time and going to when Dean and I put the flywheel back on. Which path were you going? I don't know, just leave it. Yeah.
It's on the house, is it?
Yeah, it is. I'll just get one bolt in and...
Oh, that's almost home.
Yeah. It's fair to say the flywheel for this Detroit's quite a lump of metal, but we eventually got it on, lined up and bolted down, so it's nice to have that out of the way finally. This meant lots more chasing threads though, just to get them all cleaned up so we could get the damper plate bolted on as well. This engine mount bolt is too far and it's hitting the flywheel here, so Dean's going to crack that one out. We'll cut it down a little bit. Old Jess runs around in circles.
Chasing flies.
Chasing flies. Alright, then I'm going to bolt this damper plate onto the flywheel. As well as torquing them to spec, eventually I also put a little bit of Loctite on all these bolts just to make sure none of this, drivetrain comes apart at all. They're not particularly big bolts, so you can't torque them up that tight.
Where's the engine mount off this side?
I took it home because I've got to cut 40mm off all of them.
Oh, right.
So I'm just taking one home at a time. And
What do you mean 40mm off?
the height, got to make them shorter this way.
Oh, okay.
So for all the bits where you want to put a tape around that shaft?
Yeah, I will actually.
Use the right tool.
I'm liking this directing stuff.
I should make you work. I got my own job.
You do have your own job.
I'm just in my lunch break.
Next job was just to bolt the mounting plate onto the gearbox. Yep, we got 4 bolts, so let me find another one. And then finally, to actually mount the gearbox onto the engine block, we also had to just lift it up a little bit. So Dean just leaving it up while I slid some wedges underneath the rails. Just gave us the clearance we needed. The little hydraulic engine hoist also made it easy to manhandle the gearbox into position. It's not a huge gearbox, but it still weighs a bit. Routine. Look at that. Lovely jubbly.
Oh, I've got the bolts in my pocket.
After that, we started taking the old exhaust manifold studs out from the block. Given we've got all brand new ones, just cranking them out with the vice grips. Easiest option. Replace the set. Putting the new studs in with the old 2-nut technique. These studs come with thread sealant on them as new because they go into a water jacket or a water gallery, but we're just putting a little bit of thread sealant on as well just to be sure.
Nice bit of sealant.
Yeah, it looks good. Then we just popped the new gaskets on and gave the manifold itself just a little bit of a clean up, get the rust off it. This one might actually have to come off a smidge to get this one on. Yeah, that's it. As a little bit of a follow-up to last week's cooler heat exchanger video, this is actually turning out to be a bit of a blocker for me. This is the piece I made the 2 gaskets for. inside here is a pressure relief valve. So what I can't do is get the piston out. So this is the piston in here, solid end. You can just sort of see the top of it in there, but it's hard to exert any real downward pressure on it. Certainly not enough to get it free. Just going to heat the casing and then fill the piston to cool it. Alright, I'm going to try tap it down. I think it's home all the way, but a bit of shock load might help, you know. Free it up. I could try drilling it out. I'm completely expecting to need to buy a new piston. I'm just trying to save the housing. You can hopefully in there see the top of the piston. It's a really kind of acute angle, but I'm going to try and get a punch in and just knock it at that angle, see if it helps at all. Ooh, I think it did. I think it moved. Yay. Wow. Normally I only get all my failures on film. Success. Well, it's not out yet, but it's moved, and that's a major bonus. Yep, much, much shallower than it was. Oh, look at that. It's coming right out. Yes, I know, my poor workbench. My workbench wants a new owner. Ah, look at that. Beautiful. You know, I'm going to wire wheel it up. Other than a little ding on the top where I hit it with the punch then, which is not a mating surface, the mating surface is all around the outside. I reckon that's good to go. Oh, thank God. Yay. Alright, in the meantime, this and this are going into a plastic bag. That's been in kerosene, so I want to clean that because the next thing I do is paint it. What am I going to do with this? I'll give it a quick clean and acetane, so I'll just finish my coffee so we can use the cup. That'll do. Alright. Clean. Alright, give that a little soak, just get the kerosene off. At least I don't have to clean my coffee cup now, double bonus. Winning. Alright, gotta go to the boat quickly, then we'll go to the workshop. On the way out to the trawler, I tied up quickly at the post office and just grabbed my mail, and Prezi from the US. As I'll open it, see what it is. T-shirt. Messing about in boats. Nice beer glass. Ooh. Now I need my safety glasses. Believe me, my friend, there is nothing, absolutely nothing, half so much worth doing as simply messing about in boats. The best quote. Oh, it's a lid too. That's interesting. A proper pint glass and a lid for the beer on the boat. Check out the Wooden Boat Experience on YouTube. I will. The Wooden Boat Experience glass coat. Okay. Ah, here we go, Scott. So thank you, Scott, that's really kind. Stickers too. St. Lawrence River and the Wooden Boat Experience. Alright, I'll check that out, thank you. Okay, now, after this morning's excitement, let's do what I came here to do, which is to grab a fuel filter, grab the other part of the exhaust and to measure the engine bay hatch so I know how much I can leave on the engine to drop it in and what needs to come off. This is the bit of exhaust I want to take up. This is the stuff I sprayed with that high temperature, ultra high temperature ceramic paint. Oh, and because people were worried, I also measured the resistance between the anode and the housing, and it's pretty much an open circuit. While I was at the workshop, a courier arrived with the new dipstick, so it was nice to have that turn up. It's certainly going to make it much easier to check the oil on this engine once it's back in the boat, which I think is pretty much essential. So, took out the old factory dipstick housing, just put that out, and then I had to compare the two lengths. So, it is, up. There, full's there. So on the new dipstick, full is about an inch above the marked level on it. So I'll probably just find some way of just scoring it so I know where it is. The next job was to take the blower off so we could get the seal and the flange in that goes between the water pump, which is attached to the blower, and the engine block itself. So this is the nicely rebuilt blower. Shame we didn't get to see that, but the guys needed it to put the timing gear on. It's all, you know, new seals, new bearings, new everything. But we do need to seal this against the block, which is why it's coming off. Remove 2 bolts and lock watch attach the pump outlet flange. Remove 3 bolt and seal assemblies. Dean's put me onto a new product in the new line range. So we got Start Your Bastard, which was the original, Shift Your Bastard. Now there's Open Your Bastard. Works really well. Instructions say this mounting flange goes flat side towards the pump. Then we have this packing ring that goes on, and then there's a gasket that goes between the flange and the block. So we'll bolt that back on and we should be good to go there. We also need to put our ring on here, just a rubber seal we saw before, so that the outlet of the water pump can be sealed against the oil cooler for the engine. Other thing I need to do is get this tube that protects the blower shaft that comes through here, so we might as well get that all rigged up. What I'll do first though is I'll secure the new dipstick to one of these bolts wherever it reaches to. It's kind of good, swivels a bit. I think that's going to be our best bet. Be nice if it was slightly shorter. This bit going on now is the tube that the blower shaft goes through to seal it so no oil leaks out. Might just see if we can get it to sit down before we put any.
Oh, no, it's hitting that.
What's it in? A hose or?
That's, see that green thing that's got before?
Yeah.
Put that in again.
Right in?
Yeah. Yep. So it's just touching it. Oh, that should try that.
Let's try it.
No, that's sitting now.
Cool.
Oh, good. Just come back a bit so we can see.
Oh, yeah, cool. This is a really good alignment with this tube. So I'll get this seal over with 2 hands. Then I'm going to have to separate a hose clamp completely so we can wrap it around, but that's no big deal. So because this flange is tapered on the inside, as you tighten it, you spread and squeeze that packing ring onto the block, so we shouldn't have any leaks here with the water pump. They're a bit manky still, aren't they? Should have thought about that. Oh well, can't all be perfect. This is the output side of the heat exchanger, the saltwater heat exchanger. I've taken this off again because New Jersey Bill commented on that video saying there's a few finer points that sort of got missed with this, and I'm going to fix it now before, you know, it goes back in the boat. So huge thanks, Bill, for sharing your knowledge and also doing it, you know, so gracefully and you know, respectfully. So thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I've actually soaked this overnight in the CFS. And it turns out that what I thought was a groove, where there was an O-ring inside here, turns out it's actually not a groove per se. It's actually one of these, which is some sort of spacer, one-use spacer, that's in here. It just looks like a part of the cast metal because of the, you know, the time it's been in and the corrosion. So it turns out we can actually knock this out. So I'm going to do that now. Let's just get a punch, get onto the edge. Glasses, let's see what I'm doing. There we go. So, not a groove at all. What this now means is that we can clean this up properly. So let's get a little bit of sandpaper and clean this right up. This had sealant in here. I don't think it needs sealant because it's actually supposed to have drain holes that are currently painted over as well. While I'm here though, I'm going to disassemble the cap to the governor. This is our little throttle actuator, with this being fuel shutoff. I presume this spring hooked under in some way too. Anyway, we'll get it apart, clean it up, get the base painted. Alright, what I am going to do is, what do we got? Yeah, I'm going to just mark this to kind of clock it. Just so I can get it back in the same position when and if it comes apart. Yeah, it's not too bad. It's coming off already, so that's good. It's interesting. I was kind of expecting this to be splined in some way, but obviously not. Now, it looks like some type of circlip around here. The gap actually looks too small to even get my circlip pliers into. Might just spread it with a screwdriver. I know, I'll plasma cut it off. Only joking. Interesting. We could probably knock this roll pin out and then push the shaft up, maybe. Alright, let's try that. That's coming out easy enough. Oh. This is my punch, extraction punch. Got it. Alright, I think I'm going to put this in the vise now. Probably should press it out, but we'll see whether we can punch it through without... Oh, it doesn't matter, a ding in there is not going to be any problem. Got it. On the shaft then, got no ring. Get a new one of those. A couple of washers. And then this circlip, retaining clip, that I'm just going to leave there and reassemble it the way I took it apart. So I'll just put this on the wire wheel, clean it up. Couldn't quite get into the corner there with the wire wheel, but
brush the last little bit out. Muttering to yourself, Stuart. Alright. Oh yeah, probably paint that too actually. Let's put that on the wire wheel, we'll paint them both. Okay, put that bolt on the wire wheel, that's cleaned up. Alright, let's take these into the spray booth and get some primer on them. Alright, what I need to do now is, I went to Pertec and saw the guy there, he's always really helpful. I've got to make new tailpipe hoses to go out of the water manifold into the water-cooled exhaust manifold. It was tricky finding the right adapters, but what we got in the end were these, because they both need to be right angle. So the advice was, get it together, put your thread locker on, assemble it, put the whole thing into the drill press, and just drill the aperture out, and it should be fine. So let's do that. Both drilled out to the full diameter now, so we'll take those back to the workshop, but I'll give these a coat of green first. Alright, this is the O-ring that came out of the governor. Let's just see if we've got something in the ballpark. Bigger and thinner. Bigger and thicker. You know, you could have every O-ring in the universe and still not have the right one. Alright, let's get this housing out of the CFS. Take it with us. Give it a quick wash and fresh. You like a lot of attention, don't you?
So, this bolt, apparently I was supposed to put a washer behind here. Not going to get it in now, so I'm just going to put the bolt in and monitor it. What can I do? Next thing I also have to do is put the oil bypass piston in here.
This is the same type of assembly that I got out that was stuck in that other unit. So essentially you've got a piston and a spring, end cap with a new copper washer on it. The idea here is if ever the oil cooler gets blocked up, the oil will bypass the cooler because the pressure will open the piston. Now the new dipstick's in place, I decided I may as well put the starter motor back on. It's quite heavy, but fortunately it's got a sort of a lip it sits on, so once it's in position it holds itself in place while you do the bolts up, so that was less painful than I thought it was going to be. On the bottom of the heat exchanger expansion tank is the inlets for the fresh water. So once again, just Hylamar gasket, got that bolted in so we can connect the hoses. Two hoses come into this housing. The smaller one I'm putting on now is actually the return from the water-cooled exhaust manifold. This larger one now is my shiniest speed part, and this is the input coming from the main freshwater pump. This smaller pulley I'm putting on the front is going to drive the water pump that Gary from LA gave me. Next up is the thermostat housing that goes between the top of the heat exchanger expansion tank and the water manifold on the block. It has just a gasket between the heat exchanger and the housing, and then one of the rubber seals like we had from the other water pump going to the manifold. Reasonably easy to get it in and out, except for a final bolt that is on the bottom here. I know I could only get one click of the ratchet each time, but eventually got done up. Before reinstalling the seals on the outlet side of the heat exchanger, I just cleared out these drain holes that were completely blocked. The idea here is that if water leaks past one of the O-rings, it drips out here rather than going into the freshwater system. So, as before, a little bit of rubber grease on the O-ring. So one O-ring in. Previously it actually only had a single O-ring, but now I'm doing it as it should be rather than copying how it was, which is lining up the holes in the spacer and the housing, pop that in, and then a second O-ring on top of that. So previously it was, you know, put together with just a single O-ring. Goes to show copying how something is doesn't necessarily mean it's right if the person before you got it wrong. Just helping a lot, obviously.
Ooh, that's interesting.
I'll come.
Oh.
I'll come. Come on. Come here, you pain in the ass.
He's going to have Hylamar feet now. He'll stick to the floor.
So first step is just putting that gasket between the heat exchanger and then this housing with our 2 O-rings in it. Then once that's in place, we need another gasket on the outside. And then once that's on, we can then bolt the bronze outlet on top of that. And then we're sort of back to where we were before, only done right. Thank you, Bill. The blue hoses you can see there are the oil hoses going from the gearbox to the gearbox oil cooler. And now I'm also putting the input pipe to the heat exchanger. The output pipe from the water-cooled exhaust had a little hole in it, so I just cut the end off before connecting that smaller hose to the expansion tank return. This one actually used to have a piece of metal in between. It actually went from metal to a metal bend to a hose, but this hose bends quite nicely without kinking, so I'm just going to leave it as a single hose. Less joins. Before heading home, I had to admire my shiny speed parts, new outlet, and here's the dipstick that I can now reach from above where I couldn't with the factory one. Well, thanks for watching. I've uploaded this video a little bit early this week because so much is happening. I'm actually filling my hard drive with footage that I need to sort of edit up and get back off again. On the weekend, I'm going to be heading up to the workshop to finish off as much as I can, because when the workshop's quieter, it's actually a little bit easier for me to film. You may have noticed a lot of this was sort of overdubbed this week just because there's so much noise and other conversations going on in the workshop all the time during the week. So, we're pushing on. What I'll do is I've sort of come over off Freiburger and made a list, so I'll show you what's left to do before we can try and start for the first time. So, got to put the blower shaft in, hook up the fuel lines and the fuel filters, reconnect the oil filter. I'm going to pressure test the cooling system, which will also pressure test all the heat exchanger cores. Then we're going to add oil, add coolant, obviously. We've got to wire up the starter motor. One of the trickier things I've got to do, and I've got to do it soon, is make up a pipe for the cooling system. Make up a pipe that feeds the water from the water pump into the base of the heat exchanger expansion tank. That is kind of a funny one in that the outlet from the engine oil cooler, which is where the water comes from, is, I can't remember exactly, let's say 50 mil, something like that. But the input is 57, so they're 2 different sizes, so I'm going to have to make something special up. I think what was there before was pretty dodgy. So my plan really is to find some 57mm pipe, probably 60 I think is the best I'll find, bend it, and then weld a smaller reduction pipe onto one end of it. So that's going to take a little bit of work. That's probably my biggest job to do before I can start the motor, because I need that for the freshwater cooling system to be complete. Then we got to put the then there's another little hose that goes from a coolant manifold into the exhaust, because the exhaust has a cooling water jacket around it. Then we're going to attach the governor again and get that kind of dialed in, which I've got a guy coming to help me do that. At the moment, I have one engine mount off because I'm modifying them all, so I need to put it back on. Running it attached to these bits of timber, you know, is probably going to be wobbly enough. Having it sit on 3 of the 4 mounts is not going to happen. So we've got to get all 4 mounts bolted down again in order to fire this thing up in the workshop. I also bought a new oil pressure sender, so I'm going to wire that up too so we can monitor the oil pressure when we crank it up for the first time. So it's not insurmountable, you know, this is the list in order to get this thing started up in the workshop. After that, I've got another list for before the engine can go into the boat, and then after that, another list before we can go on this fishing trip,
and do any sort of sea trials. Look, it's a fair bit to do, but to be honest with you, most of those items are relatively trivial. They're just there so I don't forget more than anything else. Now, one last very important thing is that a viewer has sent me this very nice Ritchie compass for putting on the dash. You know, it can be tuned and, you know, for the deviation from the boat and everything, so it's going to be awesome. I'm going to put it just in front of the wheel here. But I lost the email. I actually had an email from the viewer saying, hey, I'm going to send you this compass as a gift from Amazon. And I was like, awesome, you know, thank you. And then I went to find the email and I cannot find it anywhere. I've searched in the trash, I've done everything I can think of. So thank you to whoever sent it to me. And please send me another email so I can thank you properly personally, because I wasn't ignoring your email, I just literally cannot find it at all. I'm going to do a video on installing this and getting it dialed in for the deviation for the boat, but before that, we'll get this engine going. All right, well, take care and I'll catch you soon. See ya.